So from its very beginning, SEPA was designed in a way that was meant to prepare students and to build bridges between faculty and the world of policy practice. So even though it was located at one of the world's major research institutions, it was also very much intended to be a direct link with the policy world. Many of the other public policy and public administration programs that emerged over the period of the 20th century, and especially in the late 20th century, had similar goals. They wanted not just to conduct research about policy issues, but also to have very close links to the policy-making world. And one of the ways that all of us do that, and certainly that we accomplish that at SEPA, is by involving practitioners in the life of the school. I think a lot of people, when they hear the word practitioner in the context of a university, they think adjunct faculty and they only think about teaching. And certainly a lot of what I wrote about in the position paper was focused on the role that practitioners can play in a public policy school in mounting the curriculum. I think that it's very important as you bring practitioners in to be involved in the curriculum to think strategically about how you do that. Which parts of the curriculum are they best involved in? And when they're involved in the curriculum, what's the best way to prepare them? At SEPA, as we bring new practitioners on board, we try to help them think about what role they'll play in the classroom and ensure that they're prepared for that part of their lives. Most practitioners know the subject material that they're going to teach very well because they've lived it for a very long time, but they may not necessarily be well prepared to convey that to students in the classroom. So part of engaging practitioners in your school is about helping them to be good instructors in the classroom. And as faculty, many of you are going to be already very well skilled at teaching, and you are in a good position to help someone else think about how to be a good instructor. I also think that it's very important when you think about involving practitioners in the classroom to help them understand the mission of the institution as a whole, so that they don't become too focused just on teaching that one class and teaching their expertise to the students who are in front of them, but that they think about that in terms of the mission of the institution as a whole. If you talk to them about your institution's mission in building a bridge between the academy and the policy world, that helps them understand what their role, both with the students and with the other faculty in the institution, might be. If you talk to them about other parts of your mission, it can help them think about shaping what it is that they teach. But I think that mission-oriented involvement of practitioners in the school starts even in their role as instructors in the classroom. Moving beyond that, though, I think it's really important for us to think about the ways that practitioners are involved in other parts of the lives of our institutions. Many of the institutions in this room, I believe, are relatively new and hopefully have involved practitioners very early in the creational phase of the school, in the same way that SEPA at Columbia in the 40s, when we started designing the school, practitioners were involved in the design of the institution from the beginning. And I would imagine that's the case with a lot of your own programs. On an ongoing basis, though, through the life of the school, there are very important ways to think about involving practitioners. Certainly at SEPA, the practitioner faculty, people who have full-time lives outside of the academy, are involved in some of the governance structures of the school. They have input to the curriculum committee of the institution. There are very senior practitioners who are involved in the board of advisors for the school. So there are a number of ways to involve practitioners, not just in the day-to-day activities of the school, but in the long-range strategic planning that you do. What I'd like us to do as we go through this session is to share some of our experiences in various institutions in these various dimensions, involving practitioners in instruction, involving practitioners in short-term governance issues in the institution, and also involving practitioners in long-range strategic planning for our institution, and to think about how that varies, in part across the kinds of schools that we all manage, and how it varies also geographically across the globe. And I think that's one of the really important dimensions that we have to think about when we talk about the difference between this strategy and this practice in a traditional public policy school versus the way that you involve practitioners in teaching and in governance in a globally oriented public policy school. And if I can reflect a little bit about our own experience at SEPA and the way that we engage practitioners in the broader global dimensions of the school, and that may help you think about some of the challenges that you may be facing and have maybe even more experience than we do at SEPA. A lot of the traditional public administration schools in the United States certainly have, through all of their history, had a lot of practitioners involved at all of the levels that I mentioned in my introduction. That engagement, though, is, I think, in some ways much easier for a public administration school that's very focused on local policy issues or even national policy issues, because you have immense resources that are there immediately adjacent to the school typically, and it's easy to draw on them. So a public administration school that, for example, has had a lot of experience training people to work in state government and city government and provincial government typically is located in a regional capital so that it can tap into practitioner resources that are there. As we think about what we're trying to accomplish with a global public policy school, where you want practitioners who have experience in global level institutions and multilateral institutions, or possibly practitioners who have the capacity to help your students and other members of the faculty think about policy practice in a comparative way, that makes it much more difficult to then draw on talent that's locally located. There are a few cities in the world where you can draw on a global talent pool without having to look outside your city, but most places where public policy and public administration schools are located don't necessarily have that local asset. At SEPA, being located in New York, we are able to draw on an immense local talent pool and a talent pool that does have experience in multilateral organizations. So there's a geographic advantage for us in thinking about the ways that we do that. But I would like us to talk about and share some of our experiences with trying to draw on practitioner faculty for instruction and draw on practitioner faculty for strategic planning and governance in a context where you're not necessarily located in a major world capital. Even in New York City, we very often aren't able to locate a practitioner who can meet a specific need who's in New York City. We've had to think about different ways of involving practitioners in the instruction of the school and the governance of the school that aren't necessarily face-to-face interaction in a classroom or face-to-face interaction on an advisory board or a planning committee. We've had some interesting experiences using some very advanced internet technologies for distance teaching and distance learning, and some fairly fundamental technologies, telephones and email, to continue to engage faculty in the life of the school, even if they're not located in New York. And once we move into a more discussional mode right now, I'd be glad to share some of those experiences with you. If I could take a second, though, and ask for some input from you about your own experiences in looking for those kinds of faculty. How many of you here can tell me that you have a significant number of practitioner faculty who are involved in the regular instruction in the curriculum of your schools? Can I see a show of hands? I can give you an example. I'll throw some numbers out at SEPA, and practitioners are a very large part of the instruction at SEPA. So we have on our faculty approximately 60 full-time faculty who will teach 3 to 4 courses a year. So that means roughly 200 courses a year are taught by regular university faculty. We have 150 practitioner faculty over the course of a year who typically teach 1 course each. So if you look down the list of classes, about half of our classes are taught by regular university faculty, and about half of our classes are taught by practitioner faculty. And that ratio isn't accidental, because if you look at our curriculum at the school, our curriculum is about half in the core and about half in the policy specializations, the concentrations that students choose. And our strategy typically is to have the core part of the curriculum, the rigorous social science analysis taught by the regular university faculty, and a lot of the second-year courses where students are focusing in on a particular field of policy practice, and also in the second year when the students are very focused about thinking about applying their knowledge and moving out into the working world, a lot of those courses are taught by the kinds of practitioners that I'm talking about. People who are out working in the field and have direct experience of the field, of the area that we're talking about. So there's a deliberate strategy there in balancing the social science analysis skills and linking that to the research faculty of the university, and then the world of practice and linking that to the career needs of our students. So from our perspective, significant means about 50% of the courses within the school are taught by practitioner faculty. Many of these people are people that we've had long, multi-year relationships with, and I think that's an important dimension of how you think about engaging practitioner faculty, not thinking of them as substitute teachers in the absence of a full-time faculty member, but thinking of them as part of the mission and the deliberate structure of the school. Now that doesn't, I'm not asking you necessarily how many of you have a curriculum that's mounted 50% by practitioner faculty, but on a scale of 10, 20%, where it's a deliberate part of the way that you plan your curriculum rather than ad hoc and substitutional. So a significant part of your curriculum is deliberately offered by practitioner faculty. And I assume if hands are not, that means that almost all of your curriculum is mounted then by the regular full-time academic and research-oriented faculty of the institution. Is that the case, or is there some intermediate ground that I'm not thinking of? Pardon? 10 or 20%? Yeah. And the practitioner faculty that you draw on, are they typically people who are located in the city where your institution is located, or are you having to engage in a process of bringing them in from elsewhere to offer these classes for you? Mostly are located in the cities where you're located. Are there any institutions here that have to engage in a process of looking for practitioner faculty outside of the cities where they're based? And what's your experience in doing that? And are there any particular strategies that you take for approaching that, for drawing practitioner faculty in from elsewhere in the world? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was just going to say, I don't feel at ease with that, because we have a three-tier faculty. We have the permanent faculty of Sciences Po, then we have academics from other institutions, and then we have practitioners. And now the academics from other institutions, we don't draw from Paris. They come from elsewhere in Europe, or even the States, or elsewhere. Practitioners would probably be in the city, but you left out that second part, which is probably peculiar to Sciences Po, maybe. But it's really a significant part of the faculty is academics from other
institutions around the world. And that's part of your global partnership. I think that's an interesting dimension and moves in the direction of where I want us to take the conversation, which is what other strategies do institutions take when they move into this mode of thinking of themselves as global schools of public policy rather than a local or a national school of public policy. The focus of this conversation in the way that it's been laid out so far has been to talk about what roles practitioners may play in a global school of public policy and in helping you think about how to globalize what you do in your institution. But the Sciences Po strategy is certainly another way of going about that. Our experience has a little bit of that. We do have visiting faculty from our partner institutions within the GPPN, but on a much smaller scale, I think, than at Sciences Po. Yeah. How many other institutions have taken that approach, bringing in full-time visiting academic faculty from other institutions? Kojun?
We are beginning to have visiting professors, but on a very small scale. In terms of the knowledge that we draw upon, we have different layers. We have our standing faculty, the ones that get appointments at the School of Government here at Peking University. And since the university as a whole is also very strong in terms of social sciences, so for some of the courses we would reach out into, say, School of International Relations, even the Guanghua School of Business, and the Law School, and the China Center for Economic Research. And in terms of practical knowledge, now we are offering a lecture-based course, but it's very systematic now. For every Saturday, we'll invite officials, primarily from the central governments or the Beijing municipal governments, to give lectures. So representing a whole range of practical knowledge. And because we have been training senior officials for quite a number of years, now it's their turn to pay back to our school in the form of giving lectures to our MP students. So that's the way we strategize the things we want to do in the future. And for visiting professors, now it's international visiting professors. We haven't been in the business of engaging local visiting professors, but obviously these are directions will proceed in the future.
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the visiting professors that you bring in? And I think this is an interesting dimension that's not directly related to the theme at hand of practitioners, but an important part of what I know several of the institutions in the room are doing on the goal of globalizing their offerings and the structure of their schools. Are the visiting faculty that you bring in always full-time scholarly faculty from partner institutions? Do you do that on a more ad hoc basis? And what's the strategy in thinking about who it is that you want to bring in? Do you, is it more opportunistic and you just have an interesting opportunity with someone who's an important scholar and this is a moment where you might build a good relationship with them? Or is there a strategy of filling in gaps in your own curriculum or a strategy of partnering with particular institutions?
The intention is to be systematic, but at the moment we cannot afford to be systematic. We just have to be optimistic.
Yeah. Are there other experiences can we, sticking to the theme of visiting faculty from partner institutions or visiting faculty from the academic side of the policy world?
Well, at the Harvard School of Governance in Berlin, for the practitioner side, I will comment on later. We take advantage of being in the capital. But as far as adjunct faculty is concerned, we do draw to some extent on the European partners of GPPN. And of course, we have a fairly deliberate strategy of filling in gaps. We are a new institution in our 4th year, so some faculty has not yet, some full-time faculty has not yet been acquired. So we take them mostly out of the German context, but to some degree it's deliberate as far as EU issues are concerned or international issues, that we also have the input from GPPN, South Pole and LSE.
Are there other experiences with bringing in visiting faculty, visiting academic faculty from other universities? I'd just like to offer. Yes, please.
And we would like to draw as much sort of talented people from outside, as you say. But international scholars, particularly living in Japan, if you bring somebody from US or Europe, it's very expensive. And as you know, the Japanese budget is really in a bad mess, so we're budgeting reduced. And we are sort of resource constrained in a way. Although we'd like to invite somebody from Harvard, Columbia, how much do we have to pay for a year to teach a course? We can maybe end up only about 2 weeks or 1 week, the maximum we can pay, which is not quite effective, I know, but it's better than nothing. So, honestly speaking, it's partly not the government policy or whatever other resources that you will find. And that restricts some of the expansion of things that you mentioned, from taking resources from outside. In the European community case, you have great partners around France, Germany, and all the other people. So you can grow on an easy term. But it's far east country like Japan. It's, of course, maybe Korea and China, we can grow some people less expensive. But if you want to grow some international and global sort of like, that's a very costly operation, to tell you the truth.
Cost is definitely one of the major considerations of bringing in.
Give you a good idea of how to raise money or get some discount.
Oh, now the hands are talking about how to raise money. It sounds like this is very diverse.
You can give me a discount from Europe or the United States.
I'm sorry, I should have asked us to do this earlier, but when you start to speak, if you will, introduce yourself and let us know what institution you're from, just so that we can get to know each other better.
I'm Tom Christensen from Princeton University, and I just had a response to the former speaker's comments. And it seems to me that if you're trying to draw American scholars to China or Japan or Korea, a big issue is really housing. And if you can solve the housing piece, in most cases the scholar will be on sabbatical and will have at least part of his or her salary paid by the home institution. As long as they don't go broke paying for an apartment, and the university can provide an apartment, then the other thing is that the professor will probably want to teach very little, maybe one course, and then have the other time for research. And if you respect that situation and not try to pile too much work on top of the professor, they can be in residence, interact with the faculty and the students, but teach a relatively limited amount. And it shouldn't cost much as long as the apartment piece is covered. I think that's true for most of the U.S. universities, that the sabbatical salary will cover at least a good part of the expenses.
Thank you very much for practical advice.
From Chiba University. Well, I'm from Chiba University, Japan. I think even with money, knowledge, and housing is great, it's still not enough. I worked in a business school in Kyoto before, and my school has absolutely state-of-the-art housing facilities for the business faculties, actually better than average Japanese housing. And Kyoto is perhaps the best city to live in Japan. You can cycle around the city. Yet, we have never managed to get one U.S. faculty to stay in Japan for a year.
Wow.
Because I think in Kyoto too, yes. And also we pay my previous employer paid those U.S. faculty extremely well by Japanese standard. Business class in and out, I can tell the price just by Japanese yen. And they are usually only willing to come for 2 or 3 weeks, twice a year at most. And I talked to them, I had long conversations with them. One reason why they are willing to spend long time in Japan, say as opposed to Singapore, is first language, second intellectual environment. They very much feel that they are isolated, and they can't talk to other faculties because most of Japanese faculty don't speak English. And therefore, apart from those nice physical environment and money, nothing else to work. So I think for countries like Japan or China, perhaps China is better because China is rising, so people get very interested in coming to China. But Japan is not like some setting. So I mean, this is what I have to say.
Does anyone in the group have a lot of success in this task of bringing in visiting faculty and integrating them into the life of your school? Some success stories rather than a challenge, and maybe some advice on how to turn something like that around? Kishore?
Kishore Hawabani in Singapore. I'm actually astonished that Japan says it's a poor country, you know. I have lived 60 years and we've always looked at Japan as the richest country in Asia. But I must confess that we've had quite a good experience, partly because I'm sitting next to the man who's responsible for bringing good faculty to our school. Professor John Thomas from Harvard University. We have an established partnership. I think, John, you taught for 1 year in our school, right? Or 3 years in our school. So we've had a good experience, partly because of our arrangement with Harvard. And I think you made an interesting point. I think the critical thing is that you have to make the visit worthwhile for the visiting faculty. And Tom, it will be very good housing in Singapore, by the way. So, so we provide housing, but it's more the fact that Singapore is becoming effectively the think tank of Southeast Asia, and you have a critical mass of very good think tanks, very good visiting scholars, and so if you walk down the corridors or you look at the daily seminar lists of things happening, the events in Singapore, you get really in touch with not just East Asia, not just with China and India, not just with China and East Asia, but also with India and South Asia also, and Southeast Asia. So that becomes the biggest draw of coming to Singapore. So the critical thing is that we try to add value to the visiting faculty. And then recently we had TJ Packel from Berkeley coming and spend a few months in our school on his sabbatical, again because we arranged for him some things to do when he was in Singapore. So I think the best way to, apart from giving salary and housing, is to create an intellectual environment that's exciting for him.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you structure a visiting faculty program? And I know from just talking to people, there are many scholars who've spent time at the Lee Kuan Yew School. Do you put out a general call for proposals, or do you handle it more on an ad hoc basis? And what's your strategy over time for bringing people in?
I think it's more on an ad hoc basis. It's an opportunity. I mean, recently we've been very fortunate. A very senior professor from Harvard, Professor Alan Alshola, used to be head of the School of Design and Engineering, likes to spend January and February in Singapore. It's warmer in Singapore. So he came this year. He's coming back again next year. He's going to teach half a course together with one of our faculty members. So two of them combined teach a full course. And I think it will have to be on an ad hoc basis. But what it does is that if the word gets around to the community, then more and more come. I mean, we discovered that after we had Alan in our school, I think John can confirm this, Alan went back and said some very nice things about the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, then we got much more interest coming up after that. So if a person comes, has a good experience, passes the word on, that's the best way to market it. John, you had something?
You have in the back row.
Karen Cherry from the program of Public Policy and Public Islamic Studies. As a matter of fact, within our program we have a structured policy to have up to 50% of our faculty as either visiting professors or guest speakers or practitioners. We are very new, probably the newest program in the group, just as 1 year old now. Throughout the last year, we managed to attract some visiting faculty for 1 semester from the region, Middle East. Yet we found it a bit difficult to get visiting faculty for a semester, 1 year for North America or Europe, but we succeeded last semester to secure 3 guest speakers from North America. As Kishore said, we arranged the program so they will fit within the course. That's the goal. At the same time, it fits within their interest. We corresponded with so many. We had a positive response from 3. As a matter of fact, again, we planned a program for the visit, each of them over 2 weeks. And at least one of them is coming back. It was interesting. We had a couple of public lectures, so it introduced the community and found a positive interaction with it. And as I asked him if he can come back, again, we are negotiating for the whole semester, but probably it's going to be 2 weeks because of the short notice. But at the same time, we have planned to get practitioners and guest speakers rather than, again, for 1 to 2 weeks. So far from the region, we hope to be able to attract some practitioners, at least for a week or so from the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Bremer from the American University in Cairo, and we had a kind of a similar experience where we had, I want to sort of also flag another issue with regard to practitioners. We had a very distinguished practitioner come in who had just retired from the Ford Foundation, and he was attracted by the existence of a research center that focuses on philanthropy issues, and knowing the head of that center. And he wanted to teach, but because he was not from an academic background, he didn't really want to take a whole course. And also, for accreditation reasons, we're careful about non-PhDs in teaching positions, which is the broader issue I wanted to flag, because a lot of smaller programs have to be careful about that, and so forth and so on. So I taught with him, actually, and we came up with a course where I can cover part of it and he covered part of it, and he was there for a whole semester, but he didn't want to teach that much, and he wasn't that experienced. So that worked out very well, and he wants to try to come back and do maybe a concentrated version of that. But I think that you do have to be creative and come up with models that try to respond to the person's interest and take advantage of an opportunity. And in our case, we also offer that more broadly on campus. We cross-listed it as a senior undergraduate course and as well as a graduate course to try to make it available to a broader range of students to ensure that we could take advantage of the opportunity.
If I could just follow on that, picking up some of those things, but talking about visiting academic faculty from other institutions, and seconding some of the other things that we've heard. Our experience, we have a number of visiting faculty at CEPA, and certainly a large number across Columbia. In general, we don't have salary issues because very often they're on leave from their home institutions. And again, our key issue is always being able to provide housing, especially even more so in New York City, where the private housing market is so expensive. And our experience is that we have the most success both in attracting faculty and then having a good outcome from their visit if there's a serious research and intellectual motivation to the attraction in the first place that then has a curricular dimension that comes on afterwards. So when we look for faculty to bring in on our visiting faculty program and to send out on our visiting faculty partnership with Sciences Po, our primary interest there is helping to deepen a research relationship between the two institutions. And then if there's an opportunity to add a curricular dimension or a teaching dimension to that afterwards, we're happy to do that, but that comes second after looking first for a really good match on a research front. Moving from the visiting faculty theme on to the question of practitioners, I would be very curious to hear similar reactions from your experiences in involving practitioners in your faculty. And if you can, let's maybe focus the comments, because I think we all have long experience of involving, I would hope we have long experience of involving practitioners in a policy-oriented school. But what are your challenges in doing that with a global perspective? And what are your strategies for helping to globalize your curriculum and the other activities of your school by drawing on practitioner faculty from either the city where you're located or around the world?
Australia and New Zealand School of Government, the Fisher engagement aspect with a little bit on the global. I just wanted to mention that we have a radically different approach to the involvement of government and practitioners. We are an institute, a business that was set up by about 8 governments, Australia, New Zealand, the state governments, and by about 15 universities, Melbourne, ANU, etc. And this is genuine government-university collaboration with all the strengths and weaknesses of that system. Our owners are government and university. Our board is government and university. The governments send the students and pay for them. The governments are closely involved in what kind of curriculum we have. They get massive feedback on what the programs are doing and evaluations and so on. And in 50 different countries, we have extremely close collaboration with government. Against that background, then, we have, of course, no problem in getting practitioners from all around Australia and New Zealand to take part in programs and find out from what and emphasise and so on. Of course, there are many, I emphasise the involvement of many governments. It's automatic to work together. It includes another international government, New Zealand, but it's very easy for us to cooperate. I've got less interesting things to say about our international involvement, but given that we bring together so many people, we have some economies of scale and scope which makes it easier for us to bring out international people where we need them to fill gaps.
It sounds like your structure automatically incorporates all of the different levels that I suggested might be ways that policy institutions engage practitioners, from governance all the way through the occasional guest lecture. Are there other experiences and possibly experiences that are more global in their orientation rather than national?
Quick comment, and I know more about CEPA courses, and since I taught courses there. There are two kinds of schools, seem to me. One is standing alone kind of policy school. The other is a professional school with a large university system like Columbia, Wilson School, probably Beida, and so on. So the challenge for the two kinds of school may not be quite different. I mean, quite the same, because courses, as Fu Jun said, that students of the policy school also can take courses from other departments and so on. That, I don't know, but one thing about one reason for hiring practitioners, probably this is my observation, is necessity, maybe, or visiting professors' necessity. Maybe more intentional, but the challenge seems to be somewhat different for those standalone policy schools and the schools within the university system.
If I could give you a sense of some of our challenges as we think about ways to involve practitioners in all of these various levels that we've talked about at CEPA, and then maybe ask for some of your insight, your own experiences in having certain challenges and overcoming them in working with practitioners in the school. We, as I said from the very beginning when the school was first designed, involved practitioners who had a global perspective in all levels of the institution. Some of the challenges that we have are directly related to the lives that these practitioners live. I'll give you one example. We had an instructor several years ago who we brought up from Washington, D.C. on a regular basis, and that's one of the issues that I raised in my introduction, and that I think is a very real part of trying to engage global-level practitioners. There aren't a lot of people who work on defense issues in New York City, so at CEPA we do have to draw on practitioners from Washington, D.C. Fortunately, that's not that far, and we bring them up. This person that I'm talking about was, in the middle of the semester, relocated by the Defense Department from an assignment in Washington, D.C. to an assignment in the Green Zone in Baghdad. The experience that he was going to have working in the Green Zone in Baghdad was directly relevant for our students. That kind of experience was why we wanted him in the classroom at CEPA. It was very real, it was very immediate. And fortunately, we were able to work with him and with the Defense Department to set up video satellite links so that he could continue teaching his class even after he was transferred to Baghdad mid-semester. We had a lot of learning to do in that whole process. He fortunately was a really good citizen about doing it and taught his class for what for him was after midnight in Baghdad. But it worked out really well in the end, almost seamlessly from the beginning of the semester when he was there in person to the end of the semester when he was a somewhat blurry video link from the Green Zone in Baghdad. We, as another example, had a visiting faculty member, so not a practitioner, but a visiting faculty member who was with us for a couple of years and enjoyed the experience so much that when he moved back to Pakistan, he asked if there wasn't a way, knowing about the video link that we had done to Baghdad, if he could continue teaching at the school. Video links are a very expensive solution to that problem, and we ended up working with him through discussion boards on the internet and conference calls to allow him to continue teaching his course on the politics of South Asia on an annual basis from Pakistan to New York. And once again, he's a good volunteer when it comes to the timing and does his teaching very late at night, and for one of our students is very early in the morning. But those are some of the ways that we try to continue to maintain a global dimension and to work with practitioners around their professional schedules, And I'd like to, I have other examples, but I don't want to turn this into a monologue. Can I hear from you about some of your experiences in engaging people who were important to your mission, who played an important part in the instruction of in your institution, but for some reason presented a challenge that you had to overcome?
It's not quite international, but maybe regional, because we deal with the Asian public officials primarily. So not of the global dimension. But what I find a bit difficult is if this practitioner, professor of the course, is going to give his experience of practical policy making, which can only be applicable maybe in that particular context, as your defense guy is saying the same probably. How can it be applied to the different stages of different economic development in each country, and how this practitioner can relate his experience to the backing of the theory, because it's supposed to be a bridge between the theory and practical experience, and force him to teach, okay, this is Vietnam, my experience in Japan. So what I'm going to teach about Japan is not necessarily applicable maybe to Vietnam directly. So I have to modify if I'm a practitioner professor. There's a guy from Mongolia, there's a guy from Kazakhstan, there's a guy from the Philippines. And there are a mixture of students over there, because we have about 10 different countries, students over there. So when you're going to give lectures, to give the global perspective from practitioner, how can you apply your main practical experience and knowledge related to the theory, which you haven't maybe learned so much as a practitioner because you're too busy to do practical things, but at the same time applying that each context where that knowledge is meaningful and alive so that they can go back home and they can use it. It's not just listening to what the other experience, people's experience is all about. And particularly the big guys are always talking about their own experience. I was a great man and I did so and so. But what does it mean in their context? Because they need to develop their countries when they go back home. They don't want to get the stories of the crowds of a hero or whatever. So I don't know how you can do that and push these practitioners to force them to learn theories, to connect to their experience and learn the experience of very small, diversified, although small number, but a diversified country, and try to make some meaningful value-added thing to each student who can get something from this practitioner's lectures of the course. I think it's not so very easy. And I'm not sure how the other people would do that. I mean, maybe in European countries, say maybe. Or if I can get some input from other people, I would appreciate it very much. Thanks.
Let's get some input from other people, but I think I will add a quick comment that I think that's probably a universal experience of how you encourage practitioners to link into some of the theoretical foundations that you're building for your students, and how you dissuade them from using the semester just to tell war stories. Anyone have an experience that they want to share about how to prepare practitioners for that link into theory? And I think it's also important to think about this as an opportunity in our schools to build bridges between the academy and the world of practice, both in terms of mounting the good curriculum, but also having a real impact on the world of practice as well.
So I come from Brazil. We have a graduate program, PhD and master in public policy development and strategies. We have 3 areas of concentration. And we also have what we call master lato sales. It's kind of a specialization for practitioners. We teach in the evening 3 times a week, 4 hours each day. It's a 1-year course. And we try to have common classes, and we gather students who are more, let's say, that have a different background with practitioners that we form in those evening classes. So what I think is interesting, I'm very surprised because I'm Brazilian,
We have a lot of problems with budget, of course, but apparently less than the Japanese, which is absolutely fantastic. This is good news for us. And we have no problems inviting American scholars, European scholars, maybe because Brazil is a developing country, very challenging. People accept to come. So we also have shorter courses, 2 weeks, very intense, 4 hours a day, and then we gather all the students. But what we really do with practitioners, and I think it's really interesting, is that we invite them for methodology classes and policy assessment. Because due to their experience, it's very easy for them to help students develop and build up methodologies in terms of assessing policy impact and things like this. So I think that the best contribution we can get from a practitioner is in terms of methodology, how to apply specific methods, or how to compare different programs, and how to measure impacts. And I think for this, they have this long experience, and they always can bring in examples and compare with different countries and see which are the differences, because it's very context-oriented, as Mr. said. And the point now is how we can also have a comparative methodology, which is not that simple. So I think that practitioners are very useful to develop good methodologies and also to help us assessing different programs and courses.
Well, while we discussed that, I tried to raise the issue. There are very different kind of practitioners, and we have partly at Hertie School of Government in Berlin reflected on that. The one is the dangerous one kind, the active, highly engaged, high-level practitioner. You cannot give a course to that person easily. There are time issues, and there is the issue of war stories and too little willingness and possibility to reflect. But you can very well have that person as an evening speaker, or have them integrated in a course where the reflection is then offered by the class, and of course also by the convener, who is a faculty member. That works, and we do that quite often, but we wouldn't give a course to that person. Then you have an interesting type. The second type, we often employ that. A high-level practitioner after retirement. Sometimes they can still be young, so we have one commissioner from the EU, for instance. That works better for 2 reasons. Time availability, of course, and secondly, often you can appeal to a certain interest of reflection after they have left office, so that you can draw them much more easily into a more reflective view on what they have to tell. And then there's a third kind, younger ones who have undergone training or education in some kind of similar education as we offer in public policy schools. So they might be in their early 40s, they're in the middle of acting, and they might not be the highest level, but they are very close still to the mode of reflecting they have been trained in 10 years or 15 years ago. So sometimes we practice that. And then you have the fourth type are strategy consultants. Sometimes you have consultants who, of course, have quite a bit of insight into the practical world of foreign policy or economic policy or administrative reform. And these consultants you can much more easily draw into the courses. We wouldn't give them, for time reasons, a whole course, but they can well do 6 hours or something. So we have 4 types, and we try to reflect the contingencies of what they can offer and what we want. So we don't press them into one formula, but we have, in a sense, a variation of opportunities.
I think that's important in the same way that we were discussing with visiting faculty, how flexibility in what we demand of them in terms of instruction can help improve a visit for a full-time academic who obviously knows very well how to teach. The same sort of flexibility with practitioner faculty and thinking about how you match their background and demands on their time to what they offer at the school is very important.
Yes, I completely agree with what has been said, but my point was really a different one. We have practitioners in the classroom, because the students have been practitioners. And therefore, some part of the transfer is done by themselves. And people who just tell war stories don't go over well, my experience. Because students know that this is not the world that they have known. So we have something which we really have to harness. It's the professional experience of our students. Bring them in and encourage them to challenge the practitioner on the ground of their own limited experience. So that makes another dialogue in schools like ours, and especially if you they insist on having a good deal of professional experience in your class. It's a recruitment pattern that you have to have. But then the problem of, a practitioner coming in and telling just stories isn't really a danger. And then of course you have to do all the things that Jobst has been talking about, be very sensitive to what somebody can bring into the classroom and give them different. One thing that we have been talking about, we'll introduce this year, is master classes. We call them master classes. It's old policymakers. They're brought in by a convener who takes on a sort of a function of making the continuity from one witness to another. And these policymakers, they just come in and talk about one of their experiences, but this is really what we're looking for. They should talk about something, and we have them speak of failures as much as of success. And in general, I would say practitioners should be held to talk about failures as much as success stories. Failures are very important learning messages.
Can I ask for a little more information on the master class? How is that structured? Is it a full semester long course?
It's more like a series of talks. We have a course called From Analysis to Policy. That's already something where a practitioner takes on the question of how do you translate good analysis into equally good policy, hopefully. And that's really something that students want. And then you have, in addition to that, a series of evening talks, let's call it that, where you have policymakers brought in. They talk about something that has been prepared before by the students. They talk about it, and then they answer questions. So it's really a give and take between them and the quote-unquote successful policymaker, or senior policymaker, we could call it that, senior policymakers, who have a lot of experience and whom we think interesting to bring in. But you have to have somebody who sort of links it all up ahead of time and plans the thing so that it makes sense, that it covers different policy fields, that he can sort of conclude in the end what we have learned. So it's a sort of you bring them in, but they're just witnesses, and you have to organize it so that you take the most out of them.
The person who does that organizing, the anchor for the class, is one of the regular faculty members of the school.
He's a regular faculty member, but he's a practitioner.
That is going to help us link into a theme that I wanted us to explore a little bit more, but you've raised another very important question, which I had further down my agenda. We're talking about global public policy schools and focusing in on the role of practitioners in their schools. I think the important element there is thinking about the characteristics of students at a global public policy school, and I want to discuss that later. But for now, I'd like us to stay a little bit longer on the question of what strategies you use to build linkages in a community between the academic faculty who are involved in your school and the practitioner faculty, so that you don't have a situation where they're in the same building but know very little about each other's experiences. Can we talk a little bit more about strategies for building those bridges?
I follow up on
practitioners to be more theoretical and to immerse themselves in the theoretical literature. I am not quite sure that is the right approach. I mean, that you get from the core faculty. What you want from the practitioner is something else. You don't want just a set of war stories. You want some reflection. But the war stories, and against the common wisdom that has been spread around here, I think perform an important function. These are the specific instances in which the real-life experience comes alive for the students who are being bombarded day and night with theories and all sorts of theorems and hypotheses. And here somebody can tell you, well, I was at a negotiating table, and this is what I did. Now, it seems to me there's a lot of value in that. Now, you can't leave it at that. You need an inductive process of reasoning that builds up from that specific example into some wider conclusion. But it seems to me that, in my modest opinion, that is the true advantage that practitioners bring. If you tell the practitioner, read these 200 books, and then go to the classroom, that's the wrong approach. You are wasting, it seems to me, the comparative advantage.
I agree with you. Okay, just presenting the kind of situation that we are in. In our case, we have a workshop, and as you said, the kind of experience, the real-life experience of policymaking is very important to be shared with students. So what we try to do is there must be some traffic control person over there, which is a core staff member of the faculty, who try to bridge between the practitioners' talk and the students. But that can be done on the workshop more on an ad hoc basis. But what I'm talking about is, if you're a practitioner teacher, for example, I've been working at the central bank. I'm very new to the academic world. So I'm designated as a practitioner professor, or professor at practice. I'm nothing really compared to the research-oriented professors are really not taking me as a full professor because I haven't written a decent article on a referee journal. But because of this public graduate school, public policy school, requires some practitioner professors. So what I'm talking about is these professors who came from the real world, like working in the Ministry of Finance or the central bank, and try to teach the mistakes of the Japanese. For example, I'm teaching the mistakes and the failure of the Japanese monetary policy in the 1990s, the lost decade of Japan. Why we made such a mistake? Please don't make similar kind of mistakes again. But I can't just relate my experience to them because I need to have some theoretical background to relate what happened in Japan to some kind of logic of why we made this kind of mistake. Otherwise, people make the same kind of mistake again. So that's sorry, it's a different kind of thing. I take your comment full that we try to accommodate some of the practitioners who come from time to time and give their experience. But you need some referee or somebody who would interpret in the context of the public policy school. But at the same time, you need somebody who on the faculty, who's got practical experience, and at the same time teaching in a kind of academically oriented way, so that it can sort of amalgamate two things together without having any referee. We're a shortage of people, sorry to say that, but I mean, we're a very small university, so we can't really afford to have one professor sitting in all these courses at the same time the practitioner is talking about. So, but I think I take your point 100%. It's very difficult for the practitioner who is working for the ministry or the central bank for 30 years. Okay, now start reading about 200 pages of updated econometrics and macroeconomics. I'm not coming here to do that, that's for sure. But if you want to get a good people with a good experience, you have to somehow sort of intermediate that process. Sorry. Just qualification.
Are there other observations on strategies for helping to build bridges between the regular faculty and the practitioner faculty in the school? Alan?
Yeah. Well, a somewhat different approach is to try to convene meetings of practitioners and academics to discuss certain problems. In other words, if we can get 10 or 12 or 15 officials who are kind of serious people to discuss a contemporary problem of government and get some academics together with them. This is a very good learning process. It develops a bit of an understanding of the approaches of the different sides. It can feed into your teaching to make it more relevant to problems that governments think are important. So it's just the workshop behind closed doors as a rule. Sometimes we can provide a good forum where it's a bit safer for them to speak.
I think that's an important observation about the dynamic of building bridges between practitioners and academic faculty in an institution. It's not just a one-way street of ensuring that the practitioners don't tell war stories, or that the practitioners have some sort of understanding of the theoretical background, but also importantly, the practitioners help the regular academic faculty of the school understand the policy context that they're teaching about. So it is important to think of this structure, whatever structures that you build, whether it's having people co-teach courses, having guest lecturers come into courses, whatever that structure is, it's important to think of it as a two-way street, because I think ideally a policy school does function in that way. It's not a one-way bridge to the policy world, but a two-way bridge to the policy world. Putin?
Our case may be unique, and the Peking University probably is also unique in that sense. When I look at the resources that have been drawn upon, I'm looking at sort of the three layers of resources. One is graduates of Peking University. So these students now, if I look at them today, they are young, but we have graduates in the past. And we will ask them to come back to give lectures. And we are also looking at the intermediate layer, MPA students. So they are here to learn some of the so-called theories. But I am skeptical, are we sophisticated enough to teach them theories? I have doubts about when Chinese say we use the word theory. It's different from the theory you have in your mind. And the third layer is we are also engaged in exec training, senior officials. So they come here, they take courses probably for a brief period of time, very condensed, very intensified, they go back to work. So our strategy in a sense is a strategy of Lao's strategy of non-action. In a sense, we do not care whether the one that has been invited back to give lectures, he will couch his story in a theoretical framework or not, because to us, that's the picture that we need to present to our students. That reflects part of the reality. You are going to deal with officials who probably are not interesting theories. So the end of the story is we'll have a mix of practitioners who are more inclined toward theories and some who are less inclined to theories. And this is all part of what's going on here in China. So our strategy in the short term is a strategy of non-action to give a realistic picture of what's going on there.
You were just talking about the different types of students that you have in the classroom, and I think that's a good opportunity to bridge into some of the issues that Gerhard raised about the types of students that we have and how we think about our student body as we think about the way that we mount a curriculum and involve practitioners in a global school of public policy. It seems to me that there are two major issues to think about there. One of them is the one that was raised earlier, which is the fact that in many of our schools, the students are, in fact, themselves practitioners and have real experience that they can bring to the table. And I think that's something that we have to think about when we bring practitioners in to teach with them, ensuring that they understand what the population is and how it may be different from other experiences that they have had lecturing or teaching in the classroom. Another, I think, very important and equally challenging dimension in a global school of public policy is the diversity in the classroom and preparing not just practitioners, but really all faculty for that element of a global public policy school. Our schools vary a lot. At SIPA, the typical classroom will have at least 50% of the students, sometimes more, who come from outside the United States. Even of the U.S. citizens, there's a significant percentage who are dual citizens and hold citizenship in another country. So it's a very diverse student body, and that is both a great resource for the school, and certainly is part of the way that we think of ourselves and our mission as an institution, but then it's also a challenge for all of the faculty in the classroom, but in particular for practitioner faculty who may not have had as much experience dealing with that kind of student body and have less time to adapt their teaching to that kind of diversity. Can we talk a little bit about our experiences and strategies, challenges, and solutions to both of those issues, to the talent pool that you have sitting in the classroom, how you draw on that to improve the learning experience, and also on the diversity issues in the classroom, and what kind of experiences you have there. And if I can add a spin that might be a third topic, is the diversity of the diverse backgrounds of the practitioners themselves. If you're a global public policy school, and maybe you're, from our perspective, bringing in practitioners from Europe, from Africa, from Asia to teach in the classroom, what approaches do you need to have to doing that as a tactic in providing an internationally diverse curriculum?
My name is and the State University of New York at Binghamton, also associated with Veda University. And I think I'm not in the School of Public Policy. I used to teach the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, in New York, but I've also been in the participation in the organization of the University. So I think we deal with the business school experience, business faculty and practitioners. I think it would be very good for us in public policy school to find out how we are dealing with this problem in business practitioners, in accounting, like that. And there are some technical things with the auditing, financial management. We have these people from business coming there. In the case of the public policy school, I think this idea will be to get people from the faculty in area, geographical area basis. People coming to discuss South Asia, Near East, that type of thing. I think that it will be difficult for getting people from the adjunct faculty who will be well versed in the theory of public policy and at the same time broad experience in the geographical area. Similarly, same thing you get from business school, they're very good in auditing or in financial theory, some advertisement, but they don't have these background of theories. So I think the idea in public policy school should be have the adjunct faculty or associated faculty with geographical area study basis coming there, rather than forcing them to learn the theory of public policy or making connections with public policy and that perspective.
Other observations on the challenges and opportunities that you face with the kinds of students that we have in global public policy schools? I'll start with Robin Lewis.
I'm Robin Lewis. I used to be director of PPPN, and actually at Columbia worked with Robin for many years, side by side. I wanted to observe that, and this pulls together things, a number of things that people have said, that of course when practitioners are brought into the classrooms in our schools, we can't realistically expect them to suddenly ingest a great deal of theory and then go and do their teaching. What we can do is to, I think, make sure that they understand the culture of public policy. And this is also true for our students. Now, how do you describe the culture of public policy? I would suggest that any global cross-cultural learning experience has to deal with a constant vibration between two opposite poles. And those poles are very fundamental human, intellectual, and cultural instincts, which are, oh, they're just like us, or oh, they're nothing like us. You're always dealing with that point of those poles of comparison. So to first take the practitioner and have them understand the nature of the audience, where they come from, what kind of organizations, what kind of backgrounds, what kind of needs they are there to fill. And then, thinking of our colleague from Tsubashi, what he was saying about the challenges of a situation where you have a Japanese central banker talking to a government servant from Mongolia and from Vietnam and from sense that the Japanese system is nothing like theirs, is to draw on their experience and to learn from the difference, not from the similarity. That's the easy part. But to learn rather to draw some principles that enable them to understand their own system better by measuring it against others and by seeing what there might be in other systems that's useful for them to adapt. So both the students in the audience have to be, in a sense, empowered. I think this is particularly, it strikes me as a very useful thought for those who are running from the regional in nature, or I think our colleagues from Africa. You have to empower the students to bring their experience out and to think hard about this issue, about what you can take away from learning about a system that is not like yours, that is not your own.
A quick follow-on to that, if I can, before we take the next question. That's one effort we also made in our program of exchange faculty. When we send faculty off to other institutions, I ask them to observe what's going on in the classroom and to bring back to us whatever experiences they can and knowledge they can about the strengths of another instructional system. So that certainly the faculty who go are going primarily, as I said earlier, out of a motivation to strengthen their own research. But we're very eager also to learn about our partner institutions' experiences in the classroom and the different ways that they go about interacting with students, about evaluating student performance, about involving practitioners in the classroom. And we've had some interesting insights so far. There was another question here on the front row.
This is Dong Sung-kong from Korea. It's from Graduate School of Governance. It's a comment, it's not a question. I used to teach in the States, and I came back to Korea 3 years ago. I taught at San Jose State University for 15 years. Then I came back to Korea. I was surprised because most curriculum was designed almost like Americans. And I was surprised because what they are teaching is they are teaching American experience. So I'm really, in terms of the globalization, it's just kind of one-way globalization. Yeah, Korea is in the middle in a sense, and they are more into advanced countries, copying almost everything taught in the advanced countries. Somehow they are not communicating with these less developed countries. How can we communicate between academics and practitioners when we don't know much about what we are doing? So the main reason I came here to this university is I want to know what we are doing as Asians. We are different. We keep saying, many Chinese people saying that we have our own theories, we have our own policies. But somehow we don't know much about ourselves. So one of the ways to link between practitioners and academics, first you have to study our cases. We don't have much cases. The theory, to my mind, is kind of in a systematic way of linking all those stories. But somehow we haven't really invested in constructing those theories. And then how can we actually teach theories to your practitioners or to your students? You may teach theories developed in advanced countries. But if those theories are relevant to your countries, then it makes sense. If not, then we are teaching something wrong. In that way, we have to look at, as the Japanese scholar mentioned, it depends on your developmental stages. Right? It's good in terms of many advanced countries. It's good to be connected with other advanced countries, and that way it's globalized. But in many countries in the middle or less developed countries, maybe they have to understand that what they are doing first, then look at and assess the relevancy of those advanced countries' experience. Otherwise, they are actually studying something foreign, and then they go back to their practice. No, it doesn't make sense.
It's our hope that the Global Public Policy Network can be a forum where that kind of cross-country mutual support in the development of curriculum and the promotion of research can happen. And hopefully this kind of venue is giving you those kinds of connections that you need to do that peer-to-peer interaction rather than just one-way interaction, copying a model from another context that may not be relevant for you. You also raised an interesting point that hasn't come up here yet, but that I've heard over and over again at various GPPN gatherings, and that's the need for more case studies that are more international in their context and more global in their orientation. I don't know if anyone here in the room has a brilliant observation on that front, but what I've heard from colleagues over and over again is that there just aren't enough of them, and that the ones that do exist are much too North American focused. My understanding is that business schools, going back to an earlier theme, have had a lot of really good experience in developing case studies because they're an opportunity to bring academic faculty and practitioners together in the development of a case study on a particular topic as a joint project. And then there's that mutual learning experience that builds those kinds of bridges that I've been talking about. And certainly that's one project that we hope that I'm not saying this is a thing that's on the schedule for next year, but that the GPPN hopes that it can promote at some point in the future. In addition to promoting conferences and interactions like this, in addition to supporting collaborative research projects, it would be interesting, I think, for all of us to, at some point, find a way through the GPPN and the community building here to promote the development of case studies. I think that would serve a lot of different needs, instructional needs, but also building bridges between the academic and the policy worlds. We are at 1 o'clock, and I don't want to stand between you and food. I want to wrap up by observing that we've commented on a lot of structures, ways to arrange teaching, ways to arrange the semester, ways to think about hiring and training. I started off by talking a little bit about involving practitioners in the design of curricula or in the ongoing governance of schools. One thing that I haven't had a chance to comment on, though, that I think is a critical part of success in really integrating practitioners into the community of our public policy schools, and that's the social dimension. We've had a lot of success at SEPA in the last few years by deliberately organizing dinners, cocktail events, venues where the full-time faculty and practitioner faculty can meet and interact with each other and discover all sorts of commonalities that they have outside of the specific task of teaching the class that they may or may not have been assigned to. And it's not a complicated idea, but I think it's one that all too often gets overlooked as we're busy thinking about the nuts and bolts of mounting a curriculum and running a school. It's worked pretty well for us, and you may have had success on the same front. If you haven't, throw a party, invite everyone, they'll show up. And on that note, please enjoy lunch.